Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today, I've got an amazing guest. I've got a super amazing guest. I'm super keen to delve into this story today. So, my guest today, we're going to discuss his true crime memoir, Ruse, which is the story of how a wannabe actor became the world's greatest corporate spy. Ruse has received praise from Frank Abagnale. I can't pronounce that, but he's a guy from Catch Me If You Can, former CIA agent Valerie Plame, Fair Game, and Bradley Hope. His previous book, Malibu Burning, the story behind LA's most devastating wildfire, won a SoCal Journalism Award and a IP Award and the Best of LA Award. His writings have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, Los Angeles Magazine, Stoneland, and Lit Hub Crime Reads. He is featured on many of the most popular podcasts going. So a very, very, very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Robert Kerbeck. How are you, Robert?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Paul.
So, well, I'm super delighted to have you on the podcast, as I said at the top of your bio. And corporate spy. So I've worked in corporate businesses. Did you ever? Was it purely in America, or was it in the UK? Because we might have spoken before.
Oh, for sure. I've rused you and gotten information out of you, Paul. I've no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did corporate spying all over the world.
Really?
Yep, all over the world and in almost every industry. And I think you would be hard pressed to find a country that I didn't call and extract information from.
Wow. You know what? I've got so many questions. I've got so many questions and thoughts and ideas. And without further ado, what I was to go with initially is your background. I'm imagining when you were a young boy and you were at college, school, and all that stuff, that potentially being a corporate spy wasn't at the top of your to-do list. So, so I'm sure that wasn't on the
No, definitely not. So my hometown is Philadelphia, and I come from a very well-known automobile family. My great-grandfather sold horse carriages in Philadelphia before automobiles were invented. He switched over to selling cars, became one of the first car dealers in Philadelphia. My grandfather took over that dealership. My father took over that dealership, and I was the oldest son. I was supposed to take over that dealership. But when I was in college, I fell in love with acting. And I really wanted to move to New York to be an actor. But no one in my family had ever been an artist. I didn't know anyone who lived in New York, so it was really frightening. So when I graduated from college, I went to work for my father selling cars. And what I found was that the trickery of car sales just didn't feel right to me, which of course turned out to be pretty ironic when I moved to New York and I need a survival job, and who stumbles into a career as a corporate spy? But that's what happened to me.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. So take me through the scenario in which the job manifested itself to you, and that situation. What if you can maybe give us some insights into what happened there?
Sure. I only knew one person who lived in New York, my college roommate's brother. He offered to show me the ropes. One day he mentioned this job that he had, and then he shut up right away, like he'd been told not to talk about it, and he slipped for a second. And I said, "Whoa, dude, what's this job? I'm broke. I need a job." And so he reluctantly gets me this interview. I go to the Upper East Side, and your audience may not know, but the Upper East Side's kind of the wealthiest area of Manhattan. It's old money Manhattan. And so I go to this building. It's a doorman building. I'm living in Hell's Kitchen, you know, in a tiny cave with two other guys. Take the elevator up to the penthouse. This woman ushers me into the nicest apartment I'd ever been in. Apartment's not even the right word. It's, you know, it's a penthouse. It's gorgeous. And so I knew whatever this woman did, it was lucrative. And we have this very strange interview. She never asks me anything about my skills. She never tells me a thing about the job, sends me on my way. I figure I blew it and I didn't get the job, but my buddy calls me and says, "You're hired, but don't get too excited because she hires everyone because no one is able to do this job." Okay. And the next day I went out to Brooklyn and to train with this woman that was the trainer for the woman who ran the firm. And that was when I began to learn. You know, I thought it was some sort of phone sales or telemarketing, and that was when I began to learn that we would use our acting skills. We would create characters, we would do voices, we would do accents, and we would trick people inside major corporations into telling us secrets, private information that they should never in a million years tell us.
Okay. So just to give the audience and people listening maybe a timestamp, what period are we talking?
Yeah, so this started, you know, very late 80s, really early 90s. That's when the book kind of begins, and then it goes through, you know, kind of my journey as a corporate spy, but also an actor. You know, I think the thing that I love about my book, and obviously I'm a little biased, is that it's kind of two books in one. It's mainly a corporate spying book, but I was a working actor, and so there are all of these experiences where I take J-Lo to a Dodgers game on a blind date, and I dance with O.J. Simpson right before he becomes the world's most famous murderer. And I'm drinking beers with Paul Newman. I'm hanging out with Al Pacino. You know, I'm working as an actor. I'm doing Star Trek and Melrose Place and ER and all of these, you know, every big show of the 90s and early 2000s I did, right? But I also had this corporate spying thing that was always going on. And when my acting career kind of dropped, that was when I went really deep into the world of corporate espionage.
Was it kind of confusing to you, a bit perplexing that you were doing this corporate spy job? You know, you got that job and you were doing that, and there was it appears that there was a degree of acting going on there with, you know, your ability to put on accents and you know, as to the title's name, able to perform your ruses, but also you know the people that you just reeled off then: George Clooney, Paul Newman, J-Lo, Al Pacino. You know, these were, you know, your inner circle, people that you were connected to. You know, went on a date with J-Lo. That's, you know, pretty much every guy's dream. What was your kind of like thought process? You must have been like, this is crazy on every level.
Yeah, well, my thought process was I could never tell them what my day job is, you know, but also in the same sense, acting and rusing, you know, were very, very similar, you know. Now, even though most of the corporate spying we did was over the telephone, the reason for that was in the beginning, we did go in person and do some spying in person. But what we began to realize is that we could use the anonymity of a phone call to get far more information, right? Because you don't know who's on the other end of the line. And if I'm portraying myself as somebody in a different office that you might recognize the name, you recognize that they're a senior person, but you don't know them, you don't recognize their voice. And again, we were actors, so a lot of times we would listen to the person's outgoing voice message. So somebody, you know, we would listen and he'd say, "Hey, this is Rick Jones in the tax department. I'm not here." And I'd go, "Well, I can do that voice." And I'd call up and I go, "Hey, it's Rick Jones in the tax department." And they go, "Hey, Rick, what's going on, buddy?" You know, and what aren't they going to tell the guy in the tax department if they believe they really have the guy in the tax department on the phone, right? So now they're releasing all this information to us, you know. So it was a performance, it was acting, you know, but obviously it was not the kind of acting that I could brag about to, you know, to Mr. Paul Newman.
Yeah. Over a glass of wine or something. You never guess who I spoke to today and what, you know, what accent I had to put on. So just in relation to the job itself and sort of almost like the missions that you were sent on, how was it articulated to you about, who you needed to speak to, what information you needed? How did that process sort of position itself?
Yeah, so when I started out working for this woman that had this buying firm, she had clients. Her clients were the largest firms in the world.
Mm.
Somebody asked me on one podcast, they say, do most corporations hire spies? And I said, no, most corporations don't. All corporations do.
Really?
Yeah,
Really?
all corporations hire spies. Now, of course, they do so very rarely directly. They almost always hire the spies through an intermediary firm. The consulting firm often hires the spies. The executive recruiting firm often hires spies because the corporation needs to have plausible deniability that if, God forbid, Robert were to get caught, it can't be traced directly back to them, and they need to be able to say, oh, well, we hired the consulting firm that hired him. We had no idea they were hiring spies. Oh, this is terrible. Now I'm here to tell you that I have personally presented my extracted data to individuals that today are one step from being CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world. So, I can tell you that, you'll see people on CNBC and Fox Business, and they're talking about corporate ethics. And yet when I'm presenting to them my extracted data or my stolen data, they're more than happy to take it because, we think of sports and we know how competitive sports are. The corporate world is exactly the same. Everyone is trying to be number one. Everyone is trying to win, and they're willing to do pretty much anything to do so.
And when you got the job and you started doing the job on a daily basis, did it appear purely for competition? They wanted, companies wanted to be the number one and didn't want maybe their rivals to still a march on them. Was that kind of like the premise behind the idea of a corporate spy and the rusing that you were engaged to do?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the first things that we would target was we would learn, and we'll think about this. This is in the era before LinkedIn. One of the reviews of the book said that I was LinkedIn before LinkedIn was invented, and it's true. LinkedIn started around 2005, 2006, but it really didn't take off until after the crash. So around 2009, 2010 is when LinkedIn really started to boom. But before then, there was really no way for people to know who worked at a firm, who ran a team, who was on the team, and most importantly, who the rock stars were at that firm. Who were the top producers, who were the top salespeople, the top traders, the top bankers, the top designers, the top developers. And we would go in and we would learn that because most firms have an internal ranking system of their employees. They have a way that they're ranking their employees. And we would find out what the rankings metrics were, whether it was what they paid people, whether it was on a sales team, we'd find out the production, we'd find out who was the number one salesperson, who was number two, and we would find this out for any industry. You can find it out. And so then that information becomes very valuable to a firm's rivals. I'm a big American football guy. And, this great quarterback, Tom Brady, when he left the New England Patriots and he went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what happened? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because they stole him. Now, of course, legally, he was a free agent, but still, they took him away. And New England has never gone back to the Super Bowl. Tampa Bay wins the Super Bowl. Corporate world's the same thing. If I can steal your number two person or your number one person, it severely damages that firm and is incredibly beneficial now to the firm where this person now moves to. So if my data can identify who the best people are, that is huge for rivals, right? And then of course we would find other things. We would find out plans, we would find out strategies, we would find out what they were going to charge for a new product, what new clients they were signing, how much the clients were paying them, anything that would give a rival a competitive advantage.
So did you get to the point where did you have to be briefed, or did you get to the point where you knew exactly the type of information that you could ruse out of whoever you were speaking to that would, I guess, benefit whoever, your business?
Yeah, so we would get the assignment from from the clients, and the clients would have a laundry list of things that they
Mm.
wanted to know. They basically wanted to know anything and
Everything.
everything
Yeah.
that we could find out, right? And so then we would go about figuring that out, and that would require a lot of research. We would actually study the firms. We would read their annual reports. We would read
There's
their
a lot
their
you have to
stock
do.
reports. Yeah. We would know, I would read all the press that they had released for the last 6 months. We would know what was going on in the city where the company was headquartered. Did the football team win the day before?
Mm.
Was there a terrible car accident on the freeway? Was there a big festival going on? So that when we spoke to people, we could utilize any one of those bits and pieces to create a story that was believable, so that the people would go, well, of course this person must be who they say they are.
Yeah.
They know about the festival that was this past weekend. Hey, did you go to the festival on Sunday? Man, I saw the
Yeah.
band that the Foo Fighters played. God, they were great. Oh, I missed it. God, I really wanted to. So now they believe you are somebody in the same town as them, or whatever you're doing to create something that they find so believable that they're not going to doubt your story.
Yeah.
And now, once they believe you are on the same team, what are people taught in the corporate world, right? Be a good teammate.
Yeah.
So now they're like, okay, you need some help, you're jammed up, you have an emergency. And of course, we would always portray whatever we needed as a crisis. There's a problem, there's a
Yeah.
situation, and we need you to help us right now save the day. Here's the information I need.
Mm. Yeah, that's really clever, because if you convey to somebody there's a crisis, I know that if somebody conveyed to me there's a crisis, I feel like I need to, at speed support whoever I'm speaking to,
Yep.
so we can avert the crisis.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, we're in trouble. Our firm is in trouble. We're meeting with the U.S. regulators right now. They're coming down on us really hard. You saw in the news what happened to our other, one of our rivals got cited, and there was a problem, and now they fired their We do not want that to happen to us. So here's what I need you to do for me. So are you going to do that? Of course you are.
Yeah. Was it stressful?
Sure. It was
Yeah.
always, yeah, very stressful. Very
Okay.
stressful.
Okay.
It's kind of a high wire act, because you're trying to get people to believe you are
Mm.
who you say you are, and you're trying to get this information. Sometimes you only have one shot at getting the
Mm.
information. There might only be one person that's really the person who's going to be able to clue you in to what you need to know, and you cannot afford to blow it.
Yeah, yeah. And did you, from an acting perspective, did you enjoy kind of like putting on the accents? If you were speaking to somebody with, I don't know, and it required maybe to kind of make it more believable to put on an accent.
Sure. Ja, this is Gerhard. I'm calling from the office in Frankfurt, Germany. We have the European Union regulators, and we need some information from the States. Right? People hear Gerhard's voice. What do? What did you just do? You laughed. You smiled. Right?
You actually, it's interesting. You do. You kind of, and it does make it. I don't know why, but if you hear a foreign voice, it kind of, I think it comes across more authentic.
Yeah. Well, here's the crazy thing. So, we had all these ruses, and in the book, I talk about all the different ruses, the inside ploy, the compliance ploy, the dropping the grapefruit ploy. And we had all of these things that we would do. The crazier they were, the more outlandish the ruse was, the more believable it became.
Yeah.
Very surprising. Like, the
Really?
crazier the story that we would come up with, the more believable it became. Because are you thinking somebody is calling you and putting on a crazy German accent?
No.
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 So when you hear Gerhardt, what are you going to say? Are you going to say nine? No. You're going to say, "Hey, Gerhardt, buddy, what's going on? What are you calling me for? How can I help you?"
Yeah, absolutely. No, if you, as I say, for some reason, if I hear a foreign voice, I definitely feel that, yeah, it's authentic. And
Yeah.
in terms of the outlandish stories, would you have to think on the hop sometimes, or would they be pretty much mapped out in your head before you make the call?
Great question, Paul. Great question. Yeah, I mean, look, strong improvisational skills, which is something that actors
Yeah,
have, definitely a major part of this job.
yeah,
Major part of this job. You had to think on your feet, because you never know what somebody's going to say, why they're going to come back with you with an objection to giving you the information. And it would be my job is, one is to try to anticipate the objection before the person says it, which required, you think of this job rusing as being a job where you have to be a good talker, and that's true. But really, I think you had to be an even better listener.
Yeah.
I could hear in your voice, like, so for example, when I did the German accent, I could hear you laughing.
Yeah.
So I know you're with me.
Yeah.
I know you're with me. I know you're digging this accent. So right away, I know, okay, so far, Paul's going with me. I got Paul. I've got him hooked on the line. Just got to keep reeling him in slowly, and get you to tell me the information that I want to get from you.
Did you regard it as a little bit of sport or competition? I've worked in sales, and I know how difficult it is to engage people, to get people on side, to listen to those subtle, the listening skills that you mentioned, critical, and to get people on side and to develop that rapport. When you were doing this, did you think, because you might have had a conversation which might have been a little bit tough initially, but then I guess you go into your repertoire of skills, accents, and listening skills, and been able to spot those subtle variants. Did you view it as a bit of a competition?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, when I started doing this, I was a young guy. The guy who got me the job in the book, his name is Pax. And Pax and I were very competitive guys, and we were competitive with each other. When we initially got the job, the woman who hired us had this small spine firm, and she only hired actors, and she only hired women. We were the first and only guys she ever hired, because she felt women were better at the spying, and she kind of was right. For a long time, the women that were doing the job were better than Pax and I were, and Pax and I had to work very hard to figure out ploys that played to our strengths. The women, they would come in as receptionists or assistants, and they would call other assistants, and they'd go, "Oh my God, my boss is such a jerk. My boss is so mean to me. I think he's going to fire me." And to my shock, the assistant on the other end of the line would go, "Oh my God, my boss is terrible too. What's going on? How can I help you? Oh, if I don't get this thing, he's gonna fire me. Don't worry about it. I'll get it for you. What do you need?" I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, you just said your boss is a jerk. And they were bonding with kind of other underpaid, undervalued assistants. But for us as guys, because back in the day, most assistants, in the 90s and the early aughts were still women, not men. So we couldn't really do that, so we had to find a different kind of ploy. And what I began to do was kind of go, I call it bro to bro. I would go executive to executive. So I would be an executive and I would call another executive. I would always make sure whatever executive I was pretending that I was more senior to the executive that I was calling. So the person I was calling was a vice president. I would be an executive vice president. Because now I'm using kind of the corporate hierarchy, the cudgel of the I'm a couple of levels above you. So now the VP probably doesn't want to rock the boat. He wants to make a friend with the executive vice president, right? And so they're much more inclined to help you. And I found that the executives that I would go to, first of all, they had access to more valuable information because they were executives, and they were also much easier marks than the assistants and receptionists who were kind of trained gatekeepers. They were trained not to release this information. But you'd get a guy on the phone and you'd be going bro to bro. You'd be talking about some sporting event or some game that, and they'd go, "Hey, Gerhard," or hey, Rick, or whatever, "What do you need, buddy? Sure, I'll help you out."
Yeah, I was going to ask you about gatekeepers, and you've kind of answered that question, because gatekeepers, clearly everybody that's worked in any type of sales function, or if you've got to engage people on the phone, would come up against gatekeepers. So your way around that was to target sort of people that had a similar role to you, but you would be one run up.
Yep. Yeah, one or two rungs up. Yep.
Okay. So did it ever surprise you that the information that you could extract from people? Did it surprise you? Yeah.
Sure, it did. And it's funny, the book Ruse has been doing great lately, and I'm grateful for all the support from readers. But I read a note. There was a comment on one page, and in one of the scenes in the book, I would get people on the phone, and sometimes we'd be on the phone for an hour. They'd be giving me information for an hour. Okay. And I read this one review said, that basically that was not true, that I had made that up, that it was preposterous, that some trained executive on Wall Street or in the technology or whatever industry would actually spend an hour on the phone with me giving this information. And I mean, I just laughed out loud. I'm like, wow, you have no idea how gullible people are. And that once somebody believes that you are who you say you are, and certainly if they believe you're a very important person in the corporation, aren't they going to do whatever you need them to do? If they believe that I'm the global head of compliance or the chief operating officer, or the executive vice president of sales, there's somebody that they go, wow, what? They're not going to go, oh, I got to get off the phone. Oh, I can't give you this. I mean, sometimes people would, because they would be smart and they would recognize something was not right. But 9 times out of 10, 19 times out of 20, 99 times out of 100, they would tell you whatever you wanted to know. And they would stay on the phone as long as you needed them to stay on the phone.
Yeah. So the guys that you spoke to, but that became, I guess, important people in terms of getting information, were these one-time calls, or did some of these people become people that you would speak to over a period of time because that relationship had been built?
Yes. Yeah. Another great question, Paul. Yeah. So a lot of times we would go in and it would be the first time we'd be talking to somebody. And if they were, if we were successful, we would make a little note. And, my notes, I would put a K for a king if it was a man. If it was a woman, I'd put a Q for a queen. And I'd keep those notes. So when I went back to that firm later on, 3 months later, 6 months, a year, 2 years, I'd go back to them and I'd remind them, hey, we spoke, blah, 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 da, da, da. And sometimes they'd go, oh yeah, when I got off the phone with you, I checked around and I figured it out, and and you rused me, and
Really?
that would be the end of that.
Okay.
But a good percentage of the time, 2/3 of the time, they'd go, oh yeah, hey, how's it going? How you been? And they would continue to tell you whatever you wanted to know. And some of those relationships, and I detail one of them in the book, lasted for many, many years.
Okay. So going back to your family, so you've gone to New York because you're an actor. You're going on a date with J-Lo. You've met Paul Newman, who Hollywood royalty. So to me, it doesn't get much bigger than that. So the job that you were doing, did you have to conceal this from them, or did they find out?
I wouldn't tell people about it. If I was at a party and, I met you and you asked me what I did, I'd say I'm in corporate intelligence. And if you asked me what that meant, I'd say if I told you, I'd have to take you out back and shoot you, right? And then we'd laugh and that would be the end of it, In terms of my father, eventually I did tell my father, and he was none too pleased. Because here I left the car business because I didn't feel, didn't feel right about car sales. And here I am doing this corporate spying, which was far more ethically challenging than car sales, right? So my father wasn't pleased about it. My father really wanted me to get out of the business, which of course eventually I did. But it took me a lot longer than he would have liked.
Yeah. And didn't you go on to set up your own firm?
I did. Yeah. So when my acting career kind of waned, that was the moment I kind of went deep into the world of corporate espionage and had a number of close calls with the authorities, which I detail in the book. And then kind of had the proverbial, crash when I all of a sudden realized this is not how I want to live my life. And, and then basically started to figure out how do I get out of this business? How do I, how do I just stop doing this kind of rusing, because I just couldn't do it anymore. It just didn't feel right to me. And I always, look, I never felt good about it. I never, and I reckon with the moral issues and the ethical issues in the book. And it's why I love the title of your podcast, My Perfect Failure, because, in a lot of ways, doing this job for all these years, in some sense, was a failure. but it was a perfect failure because I was very good at it and it was very lucrative. But it's also not how I wanted to live my life. I wanted to be a successful actor. But and even though I worked as an actor and I made a living as an actor for a number of years, it just didn't get to the point where it was kind of self-sustaining. Anyway, so I as a young guy, I rationalized the moral issues because I was like, hey, this is just a survival job. In the beginning, I was getting $8 an hour, and a lot of the work that we were selling to other companies was getting people better jobs. So we rationalized it like, look, this is just the corporate world, dog eat dog. I'm helping get people better jobs, and that. But as time went on and we started to make a lot more money, and eventually I went from making $8 an hour to $2 million a year. And that was when, that moment, was when my child heard me on the phone one day rusing and asked me what I was doing and basically called me out, my 8-year-old. And that was the moment where I realized I have to get out of this. That this isn't right. And that was, kind of the beginning of my extrication from this crazy world.
And it's clearly you're creative at heart and in your spirit. And, I think writing is very close to your heart. And it's led to a number of books, number of awards, and Ruse. So how did Ruse come about? Putting pen to paper, where did that idea come from?
Yeah, so when the my midlife crisis came and the crash came and I gave up this business, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well now what am I going to do? And I was pretty depressed, and at one point I sat down and I wrote a suicide note.
Oh, really?
Now it wasn't me writing the suicide note. It was this guy that I had met, this crazy guy, and I always said to myself, boy, he'd be a great character for a story. And I had been an English major in college before I got into acting, but I hadn't done any writing for many, many years. But one day I sat down and I wrote this suicide note in the voice of this character. So, fiction. But because I was going through all these emotions myself, it felt really honest. It was really true, right? And all of a sudden I read it to an actor friend of mine, and he was super supportive, and he said, you should write a book about this character. And so I did, and I wrote a novel. And the novel was terrible. The novel was bad, but there was something about it that was true. There was something about it that was powerful, and it inspired me to work on my writing. And so I started going to some writing conferences. I started writing short stories. I started getting the short stories published in magazines. I wrote some essays. I got the essays published, and all of a sudden I went, wow, I think I'm starting to understand how to do this. And one of the early essays I wrote was basically one of the first chapters of Ruse, and I read it at a writers' conference, and people flipped out, and they said, oh my God, we had no idea this world of corporate spying existed. This is insane. This is crazy. You should write a book about it. And right as I started to write the book Ruse, we had a terrible wildfire. I live in Malibu, California. Your audience may remember a couple of years ago, we had a horrific fire that burned down half the town. People died, animals died. Couple thousand homes were lost. And I live here. I fought the fire with my family. We saved our house. 17 of 19 on our street burned to the ground. The LA Times asked me to write an essay about it, which I did. A publisher read that essay, said, will you write a book? And so I wrote this book, Malibu Burning, about this terrible wildfire.
Okay.
And that book did really well. And as you kindly mentioned, it won a number of book awards. And then I got back to writing Ruse. And I wrote Ruse during COVID, which obviously was a very sad, difficult time. So I wanted to write a book that was a page turner, write a story that was a page turner. I wanted to write a book that was fun to read. People say Ruse reads like a spy novel, but I'm here to tell you that everything in it is true. I'd like to say that I've written an honest book about lying.
I love that sort of contradiction, an honest book about lying. So when you were writing the book, were you worried about, obviously, it's not just, like a corner shop, they're not just corner shop bruising.
Yes.
It's corporate, it's international. I'm sure there's a chain of people that were like, we don't want this to come out. We don't want the idea that people become aware that corporate spying, exists.
Yeah, no doubt. And so one decision that the publisher and I made was to change the names of the companies in the book.
Okay.
So the names are all made up names,
Mm.
because even though I could prove that these firms were hiring me and they were utilizing my services, at the end of the day, major corporations have armies of attorneys on staff and they could sue me into oblivion. I do not have the funds to compete with, the legal budget of major corporations. And so we decided it was better to be safe than sorry, and we changed the names of the companies.
And who'd want to go for that process anyway, even if you've got
Yeah.
the funds? It's like, who wants
Yeah.
to be in court every day or answering emails or answering letters?
Yeah.
Even if even if you've got the funds, it's not a road that anybody would want to go down.
No.
And when I was reading your bio, it's like a who's who in terms of that space, who has kind of acknowledged and endorsed, what you were doing, from the guy from Catch Me If You Can, sorry, Frank, and Valerie Plame and Bradley Hope. So what was it like to have those endorsements from those people that understand the skill, the dedication, the challenges that you have been up against to actually do what you've done over this period?
Yeah, I mean, it was really incredible to get blurbs from those three people. When, for your audience that may not know, when you write a book, what the publisher does is they send out advance copies of the book, and they send it to writers that are, quite frankly, more famous than you are, right? Authors that have sold more books than you have, because what they're looking is to get a testimonial from a really well-known author that's going to help your book, so that people that loved Catch Me If You Can are now going to buy Ruse. And what was shocking to me and beautiful was that everyone we sent the book to read the book and said, yes, I love this book. I want to give a testimonial for this book. And I couldn't believe Frank Abagnale, Catch Me If You Can. I mean, that book was made into, an unbelievable film, right? Yeah. So, for that guy to put his name on my book, it was just incredible.
And he wouldn't do that unless, because he's somebody that would spot any type of it not being authentic or not being in any shape or form, what you've written about. He would spot that because of, his skill set is understanding these things. And I'm sure I've heard mentioned, I've listened to some of the other stuff and read some of your stuff about there's a potential TV program or production, something in the works.
Yeah. So, it's happening right now. There are a lot of people that have expressed interest. I'm basically signed with a production company, an incredible production company. And they have a big agency, and the agency is fielding, inquiries, to make Ruse into a TV series.
How do you feel about that? That's incredibly. So would you, so I've got a couple of questions. Would you act in that, because you're an actor as well? You could act in that?
That's funny. I think the answer to that is no. But you never know what could happen. Somebody that came out, one of the producers that is interested in buying it, I think he was trying to win me over to his offer, and said, well, hey, why don't you play your father in the story? Because my father's a big part of the book. Obviously, I can't play the young version of me, because that was me at 25. And clearly I'm not 25, but I'm the right age to play my father. And that would be an incredible thing. My father's not living, so to be able to kind of bring him back to life, that would be about the only thing I would consider doing. But, when a TV series gets made, there's so many factors involved. One factor is, you've got to get recognized actors in it so that audience people tune in. And so, that part of the father, you might be able to get some really, really famous actor that wants to do that part. And in that case, that would be much better for the show than me doing it myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I would be like, I would say to them, look, I will be your last choice. If you cannot find anybody that is well known and that you love, you could bring me in at the last minute.
Yeah, yeah. And okay, so my other question was around, because obviously you're central to this book, to what happened, and obviously to any potential program or TV series that is looking like it's very close. Would you executive produce, or would you be involved in to making sure that I know nothing about this, by the way, so just
well,
things on the set are authentic and
no, and by the way, for someone who says that they don't know anything about it, that was a very astute comment, because look, it is my life story, and while I'm not proud of a lot of the rusing that I did, I wasn't stealing money from the elderly, I wasn't dealing drugs, so I don't, and again, I'm not rationalizing the rusing. I deal with the moral issues in the book, but I want to make sure that if there's a TV series about me, that I'm not ripping off old people in the TV series, and I'm not dealing drugs in the TV series, that it's just what I really did. So yeah, it's important that I'm involved, so that I make sure that, whatever wrong that I do in the book and in the TV series, it's based on what really happened.
Yeah, and I guess also I'm thinking that to get any, again, not having a background in production, film, entertainment, to get to the real essence of what happened and a little detail, that you were there. Yeah. So if you're going to go to if they're going to go to all the trouble to make a TV series, then to my mind, if it was my budget, I would be saying, "Where's Robert? We need Robert. Robert, did this happen? Yeah. How does he need to act? What does he need to say? What accent does he need to put on?" Right. All those little details, I guess matters.
Well, I like it. I think I'm going to have to hire you as one of the producers, Paul.
I would love to. I'd love to come to Malibu. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's true, because not only are there all of the things in the book that I document, but there are a zillion things that are not in the book, because I wasn't going to write an 800-page book, so there are many crazy stories, ploys that just didn't make it into the book for space reasons, So those stories, if you do a TV series, and if you're lucky enough that the TV series runs for 2 seasons, 3 seasons, 4 seasons, 5 seasons, you need content. You need more crazy stories. And so, yes, they definitely want me to be involved on a regular basis, so that I'm not only checking to make sure things are accurate and work well and are fun, but also for more content.
Yeah, and I imagine. So there's another question I had. So you mentioned that you couldn't fit everything in. Do you think there could be a ruse too?
Oh, that's a great question. You're the first person that asked that. I don't think so, because I've got another book. I've got 2 other books that I'm pretty much done now. Yeah. And I find that I'm kind of a type of person, once I've done something, I kind of move on from that. So I don't know that, but I could. I mean, I know that there is enough material, but I don't know. Somebody would have to ask me to do that. If somebody came along and asked me to do it, like a publishing house, and that would mean they would call me up and they go, "Hey, Robert, we want to pay you X to write another Ruse 2." Yeah. Then that would be a different story. But for me to write it and then try to sell it, I would not do that.
Okay. And I'm getting towards the end now. So just a couple of questions spring to mind. What was the process like for you, I guess, going back to a guy in his early to mid 20s and going through his experience and I guess putting pen to paper? Was that a therapeutic process for you?
I mean, it was kind of fun, going back to those days that were so crazy. And the exhilarance of youth, because here I was, I became a member of the Actors Studio, this world famous, acting place in New York, where, Al Pacino came out of, and Marlon Brando and Marilyn Monroe and Jane Fonda and Paul Newman, and, all of these incredible actors that, you can make an argument that all the greatest actors from the, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s came out of the Actors Studio. Robert De Niro. So, here I am at the Actors Studio as a young guy in the 80s, late 80s, so it was pretty exhilarating, and so it was fun to remember a lot of that stuff.
And I think you've answered this question, but I just keen just to recap my memory. So Rusyn, does it exist today, or does it exist in a different shape?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and look, people ask me that question, corporate spying is alive and well. And LinkedIn, while there's a lot of information on LinkedIn, LinkedIn cannot tell you who the top people are at a competitor organization. LinkedIn can't tell you, what they're charging clients, what contracts they have, how much the contracts are worth, what their future plans are, strategies, new products, new product pricing, all of these things that a firm's rivals want to know. So corporate spying is alive and well.
Okay. Robert, it's been an absolute delight. I'm looking forward to reading the book. I haven't read it yet, but I will be getting and reading it. And
you're a podcaster, you can listen to it too, because it's on Audible. And I narrate the audiobook, which is kind of cool. And I mention that because, a lot of people that do podcasts and listen to podcasts, they actually like to listen to books more than read books.
Oh yeah, how did you know? How did you know that? And so for people listening who either want to get the audiobook or get, a copy of the book, where are the best places?
The easiest is just to go to my website. It's just my name, Robert Kerbeck, Kerbeck, robertkerbeck.com. And you can, buy the book from wherever you like to buy books. You can also see the trailer, so that you can get a sense of what the TV series is going to look like. Because the trailer is up. And there's also, a bunch of other things. You can see some of the movies I did over the years. You can see me dancing with O.J. Simpson right before he became the world's most famous double murderer. So there's some pretty crazy stuff on the website.
That's another book.
Yeah. Well, I've written about that. That's a whole chapter in Ruse. Is the O.J. Simpson is a whole chapter. Okay.
I guess you've got so many books because you've lived such an extraordinary life, and it's a lot to come. So I guess there's lots there. So what I will do, Rob, I'll put all the links and everything on the show notes, so it's very easy for people to get the book, and hopefully, hopefully people will provide you with feedback as well.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love to hear anyone that, I'm very easy to reach. I have no filter. You can message me on any social media. You can email me directly from my website, and I respond to everyone.
Okay, lovely. And I'm super keen to stay in touch to find out about the TV program. So maybe if that comes out, we can have another. When that comes out, we'll have another conversation. I'm definitely keen to hear more about that.
I'd love to do that.
But Robert, thank you so much. There is a reoccurring question that we have on a podcast, which is, if you could invite 3 inspirational people for dinner, they can be alive or past, who would you invite?
Man, alive or dead?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think I as a writer, I gotta go with William Shakespeare as one, because I gotta go, how did you write all those plays? And so that would be one. And then maybe politically, Martin Luther King, because of what he meant for our society and our planet. And then I'm going to pick somebody that's alive because he's just my personal hero. My personal rock star hero is Peter Gabriel. Yeah. So I'd love to just sit with Peter Gabriel and go, man, how did you write all those great songs?
I think he would love your book, the book as well.
That's cool. That would make, if I knew that Peter Gabriel read my book, man, I would be a happy man.
Send them a copy. I think when the TV series comes out, I think that's gonna be interesting. Yeah. But Robert, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story, your amazing story. And it's been a delight talking to you. And I hopefully, the TV series will do equally wonderful things. So thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Okay. And thank you, everybody, for tuning into this episode of My Perfect Failure. We're always looking to grow the show, so please do share this episode far and wide. People will definitely be keen to hear more about corporate spying. And your feedback is very welcome. So keen to hear about things you like and equally things you don't like. So you can find me at Paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the website contact page. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.